Good morning, everybody, and welcome into a Tuesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. Another day, everybody, 72 days away officially from the Philadelphia Eagles season. We're 28 days away from the Eagles reporting to camp and 29 days away from them taking the field for training camp. Johnny Mack, how you doing on this Tuesday morning, brother?
Hot. 100 degrees hot. So hopefully some Eagles talk will cool some locals off. But yeah, it's a rough stretch, and you start thinking about baseball more than football this time of year. But hey, man, training camp's right around the corner, and it's good to get this heat out early because hopefully we'll have some nice days in training camp instead of 100 where they got to practice at 6 in the morning.
Yeah, I love your optimism though, of because there's heat today, there
Yes,
might not be heat later in the summer, which is no
correct.
guarantee. We'll see what
No
ends up happening.
guarantee.
No, and then I also love the analogy you used of maybe tossing some ice on anybody who's hot today with our Eagles takes. That might cool them off a little bit. So good stuff. I've got plenty to talk about today. I do want to welcome and thank everybody for being here. As always, you guys have been crushing it all off season for us. So we appreciate all of our great viewers this morning. Don't forget to hit the like button for us. I'd like to try and get to 150 likes minimum. So let's do that. We appreciate all the people in here who hit the like button for us. Comment down below and share their thoughts in the chat. A little late this morning. We apologize. Just some technical issues on the back end, but all handled now. And here we are live. John, I'm going to start it off today. We have been following you and Ed Kratz's Sports Illustrated Top 25. You guys have done this, I think, for the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure how long you've done this now, but you guys are down to 21. So we gave 25 and 24 yesterday. 23 actually released Sunday night. So we'll do 23, 22, and 21 today and get the people updated on where we are with the top 25 players on this list. John, the beauty about being in the 20s on this list is I have no freaking idea who you guys are putting next. You get to like top 10, you're like, all right, it's gonna be
Yeah,
lame. Come
yeah.
on, it gets a little easier. Top 25, it's a little tougher. So let's start it off, John. Yesterday, 25, we had Jahad Campbell and Drew Makuba. It was your guys' only tie on the list. So we had the two rookies coming in at 25. You had 24, you had Matt Pryor, returning offensive lineman. Then you have 23, Johnny Mack. Let's start there, brother. Who is 23 on the J Mac Ed Kratz top 25 list on Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, we were talking before we hopped on here, and you mentioned a Tamu signing. Well, Matt Pryor's already on the list, so this is
Oh, shit.
back-to-back Tamu signings with Adoree Jackson coming in at number 23, the veteran corner. Um, Eagles have long liked him. Back in the draft, they tried to sign him when he was a big name free agent, and he signed with the New York Giants. They wanted him that year. They've long liked the player. Um, Even Nick Sirianni gave him an unprompted sort of shout out at one point this offseason. So um, Eagles have long liked the player. I think he's versatile. He's capable. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's sort of the insurance policy for Kaylee Ringo. Kaylee Ringo doesn't seize the job, which I think he will. But you could do worse than Adoree Jackson in the cornerback 3 role. Now, the question is the Eagles were so good at it last year with Isaiah Rodgers. Number one, maybe you don't need it as much because Ringo's younger
Right.
than Darius Slay. So hopefully that's the instance where you don't need it as much. But if you do need it, I still think you're going to be solid at that particular position. And I know, you got to get to 25 on this list, and even the Eagles, who have the best roster in football from most people, you're about 17. You get to 17, and you're like, all right, now you got to start saying, put some projection into it. All right, who's capable versus who's got upside, things like that. And Adoree's just I brought up baseball earlier, professional hitter, that type of guy. He just knows how to play. And I think he's a very valuable addition to this team and somebody that makes Vic Fangio probably sleep a little sounder at night, knowing, well, if this doesn't work, I can just put this guy in there.
Well, last year, Johnny Mac, Isaiah Rodgers was really I don't want to say very good, but a pretty damn good player when he came in when Darius Slay missed. Do you think Adoree Jackson is an upgrade at that spot, or yet to see, or what's your feeling on that? Because Isaiah was good in the time he played last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's similar to, he might be a better player, but is he going to play better?
Yeah,
Probably that's one of those things.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like Oren Burks as well. Oren's been around for a long time, and they happen to get the best of Oren Burks in a 3.5 game playoff run.
Yeah, right. Not everybody got the best of Oren Burks though in his career.
So that's kind of and Adoree's a better player than that. He's been a long time starter. But he is, on the descent, 2017 first round pick. And he's been, like I said, he's been a very good player for a long time. When he left Tennessee, he got a big money contract, and he was, basically in New York, and he was scheduled to go visit the Eagles, and the Giants pulled off, didn't want him to leave the building. At the time, he explained, we asked him, why did you choose the Giants? And he said there was just a bunch of Southern Cal guys there, so he's more comfortable as a USC guy. And he was more comfortable because he was going to a place with a bunch of guys he knew, and that's why he chose the Giants. But and he played well for the majority of time, and then he slid back, and he was sort of a part-time starter last year. But this is a guy who started 82 games in the NFL, and earned, at the time, you think about NFL inflation. 3 years, $39 million in 2021 was a big deal at the time.
Yes, it
may
was.
not seem that way at this point, but at that time was a big deal. So he was a good player in Tennessee. Good player
if you
early.
comped that today, John, it'd be what, 3 years, like $50 million today, probably somewhere.
Probably, yeah, probably. So that's how things quickly escalate. Now, he's not the same player, obviously, and part of it is age. He's going to be 30 in September, so we all know that's a dirty word in the NFL, 30, especially at the corner position. Coming off Slay playing so well late in his career, that's not normal. And he did kind of slip back in New York to a part-time role, which wasn't a great defense. Should be better, but probably, football's such a complimentary game. When your offense is so bad, the defense is going to look worse. And I think that's what happened with the Giants, because there's some pretty good defensive players on the Giants. We've talked about a little bit their front, which on paper looks like it's one of the best in the NFL coming into the season. But when your offense is so incompetent, that has a big bearing. You saw complimentary football
Absolutely.
in a brilliant standpoint from the Eagles. It was the exact opposite.
It was last year was literally the perfect fusion of complimentary football, which is why it's going to be hard to replicate.
Yeah, so I think people need to put that context into it with the Giants. But yeah, really just a good, solid player who I think was a smart signing by the Eagles.
Yeah, good stuff there for Adoree Jackson coming in. John, what do you think of Adoree's fit in the scheme with Vic Fangio? I mean, you just talked about how we'll see if we get the best out of him. You get the best out of Oren Burks last year. There's no guarantee you always get the best out of a player. Maybe it's an optimistic thought, but I like to think that Vic Fangio is a big part of the reason that you got the best from a lot of those players who did step up for the team last year. How does Adoree fit into what Vic Fangio wants to do on defense? How do you see that coming into the year?
Well, I think he's because he's a good player, ton of experience, high football IQ, so he can do a bunch of different things. He can play either corner position, can play inside if you have to. So anytime you have a guy like that, it's going to fit well with Vic. And to me, that's not an issue because he can do a bunch of different things. But the thing is, you don't want him to play. You want Ringo to seize the job, and he's very young. He's younger than Quinyon Mitchell, even though this will be his third year. Obviously, Quinyon's very young, and Cooper's very young. You want those guys to be all three-down players, basically. Plus, as Vic will say, the 160 times or so you're in base defense during the year when there's only two corners on the field, that would be Ringo coming off. But that's the projection. And you don't want to rotate corners. So it is an insurance policy, but I think it's a good one.
How much do you put into it? Might be zero, but he is the oldest guy, John, in the second. I think he's 29 years old. You got Ringo, you got Quinyon, you got Cooper, you got Reed, you got Sidney and Makuba. I mean, we got a very young secondary. And I will say this, while I'm optimistic, if I had to pick something I felt like could slow that defense down or could create a little bit of not elite caliber play from the open, I think it's pretty young. I think there's a reason that not every team in the league just builds with all youth. I mean, I think you need to have the right fusion of both. It's a very young defense. Does that Adoree being a little bit more of a veteran player help out in that secondary? What do you think?
A little bit. I mean, you certainly that kind of experience that I mentioned, but if you're not playing, it's difficult to lead. Other than, naturally people, as I mentioned, he's turning 30 in September, so early in the season. People will gravitate towards him, the younger corners, I would think, behind the scenes. But if you're talking about, Darius Slade leadership or Brandon Graham leadership, you got to play to be that. And he might play, but that would be a negative, I would think, from the standpoint of what the Eagles want to happen. And that's for Ringo to seize the job.
There you go. There's Adoree Jackson coming in at number 23 on the list. So, John, as you pointed out, two Temu signings so far on the top 25, but we are down at 25. Yeah, everybody. I mean, you can't knock it too much. Even the best rosters in football will have to have some guys down here that have question marks, and like Johnny said, some projections. John, let's move on to 22 on the list. Creeping down. 22, Johnny Mack goes to who?
Jahan Dotson.
Ooh.
Everyone's favorite. I'm joking. I think, I've said it pretty consistently. I think this is the best wide receiver 3 in the Nick Sirianni era, by far, pretty much. I don't think a lot of people know that yet because they don't use the wide receiver 3 here is not going to get a lot of traffic for two reasons. One, it's a run heavy offense, and two, it's, AJ's so good and Devontae's so good. And Dallas, throw Dallas in there as well. It's so good. So you're talking about the fourth the fourth sort of guy in the passing offense. And one of my favorite moments ever, which I probably have said in the past, is, Doug Peterson not breaking down, I'm exaggerating, but there was a time that Mac Hollins was playing very early in his career due to injuries. The Eagles were in that situation where they didn't have anything at wide receiver. And Mac Hollins was starting at wide receiver, and he went about 2 or 3 games without getting even a target. And he was getting a lot of questions about it. He broke down at one point, and he's like, guys, he's like the 6th option. You should be ripping me if I'm getting to football. I'm designing plays for him. I think a lot of people don't realize you don't design plays for your 5th and 6th option on offense very often. You may come up with something where you want to fool somebody
Yeah, right.
I remember the Zach Pascal touchdown a couple years ago where that was a nice job by Shane. But there's no volume. You're trying to fool somebody on a given play. You think you have something, and in that case, it worked. If the Eagles had it, I think people would recognize if the Eagles had a higher volume passing offense. I think because Jahan Dotson was the 16th pick in the draft. Now, he probably was overdrafted. Didn't work out in Washington. But one thing when you're up that high, you're gifted. And when he's here, like nobody's paying attention to him. And he's always matched up against the third best corner for the most part on the other team, who can't deal with a guy with that physical skill for the most. There's very few third best corners that can deal with a guy with the talent level of Jahan Dotson. And you started to see it late in the season, the Giants game week 18, where they didn't play the starters, and then in the playoffs, very little he had the touchdown against Green Bay, had the should have been 3 big catches against Kansas City in the Super Bowl. And you saw the matchup advantage the Eagles have. It's nice to have. And, I don't project a lot of volume, but Nick has said it pretty consistently when talking about his third receivers in the past, whether it's Quez Watkins or trying to get the last piece, the last little bit of toothpaste out of the Julio Jones tube. You're not going to get a lot of traffic as the third receiver on the Eagles, but when the football comes your way, you got to make the play. And that's what Dotson was doing late last season.
Exactly, especially in that Super Bowl. Big play came his way. He made the play. Got to give him credit for that. But John, realistically, what option is he? I mean, you got AJ and Devontae, you got Goddard, you got Saquon, you got Jalen Hurts. Could you even toss Calcaterra above him? I felt like Jalen went to Calcaterra more than he went to wide receiver 3 last year.
I think of the passing offense, he's fourth, behind AJ and Devontae in Dallas, and then it's Jahan. He's ahead of Calcaterra. He's ahead of Barkley in the passing game. But 4 is already deep down the list. It's not 6, and then each play is different. But I'm talking about volume. If Goddard's not in the game, Calcaterra gets bumped up. If AJ's taking a breather, Jahan gets bumped up. That rarely happens, obviously. Or Devontae, he gets bumped up. So it's all contextual as well. But I'm talking about the enormity of the season. And I think you'll see. Remember, he got here on August 22nd, I believe, last year. So he didn't have an off season. He didn't have a training camp for the most part. And this year he's around the whole time. He's already developed that. It took him a while to develop the chemistry. It takes a while for Jalen to trust his guys. Now he trusts them. So I think it'll be better from that standpoint. Yeah, and I think it's a big advantage. It's one of those not a lot of people talk about it, but there's maybe 2 or 3 third corners in football that could deal with somebody of that talent. You normally don't have a third receiver with that talent. And the Eagles do. And they're only going to have it for 1 more year, but they should take advantage of it when it's here. But that's, do you need to take advantage of it? Probably not.
Right.
They should a little bit more.
19 catches, John, for 216 last year. And then the postseason, he did have 53 yards. Obviously, he had 3 catches for 53 yards, many of them coming in that Super Bowl. You think that goes up? I know you're not a stat projection guy, but I'm simply trying to gauge the use rate of Jahan Dotson, because I'd love to say, hey, it's going to go up. But
I think it is from just what I said. He wasn't here till August 22nd, so it took a while.
So he's more ingrained. But my problem is this: even if we predict that the offense changes a little bit this year, and they do pass more by either by design or by necessity based on what defenses are doing. Call it 20% increase. Jalen's looking at 25 to 27 throws a game. All right. You got AJ, you got Devontae, you got Goddard. Like, I don't really see, even when you have a running back like Saquon and you can run the ball like you do, I don't see him being able to get the ball a lot. And it's not even a knock on the player. It's just the nature of the beast.
No, it's not. It's not. It's never going to be a high volume position. But that doesn't mean he's not a good football player.
I'm not thinking high volume. I was thinking 500 yards, but I don't think that's realistic either.
Well, it's a little bit more realistic because he's here. And like I said, it generally takes a while for Jalen to trust people in the offense. And now I think he does. So I think he's going to be more involved. Whether it spikes that much, that depends on the effectiveness. Like, again, complementary football, that depends on the effectiveness of the running game, the health of the other wide receivers. Obviously, if he's playing, he's going to beat that. If unfortunately somebody else gets hurt, so a lot of things factor into that. That's why I don't like stat protection. I mean, how many games is AJ going to miss? 4 games again? Well, if that happens this time, I think, he might have a 70-yard game. He might have an 80-yard game. And all of a sudden, bang, you're right there.
Yeah, right.
Because I think, this time, Jalen he's on his radar more because they've developed that chemistry. It's really hard to develop chemistry in 2 weeks.
Yeah. They traded for him literally at the end of camp last year. So not a lot of time last year for him. So he is in. Jahan Dotson coming in at 22. So we got Jahad Campbell and Drew Makuba at 25. Matt Pryor, 24. Adoree Jackson, 23. 22, Jahan Dotson. And now, John, let's move into 21. Who is 21 on the list for the Ed Kratz, Johnny Mack, top 25 Eagles?
Well, we just talked about Adoree Jackson, 21, coming off a strong spring and set to seize the job is Kelee Ringo at corner.
I'm surprised he ended up above Adoree. I mean, it makes sense because he's supposed to be the starter. So I was hoping he was above Adoree, but knowing you, and I guess Ed maybe slanted this, like on your list, on your 25, not Ed's, did you have Kelee above Adoree?
I don't have it in front of me because I was having computer problems, but I will, when we go to break, I'll get it.
Right. But you see what I'm saying? I thought you'd go with a more established player. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, let me backdoor it. I'll tell you. All right. I had Kelee at 24 and Adoree at 25.
Okay. So right next to each other.
Yeah.
And wow. Ed must have had Ringo higher then.
I'm trying to find Ed's. I'm trying to backdoor it.
Sorry, I'm asking you to do a bunch of shit on the fly here.
No, well, normally I have it, but
I know the computer crap. That's why we were 5 minutes late this morning. Johnny Mac's computer went kicked the can for a second.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't have Ed's in front of me, but I'll try to find Ed's. But yeah, Ed obviously was higher on both because they landed higher. So but that's the thing. As I said, once you get, it was about, and now that I have mine, it goes to really 17, where then I'm like, all right, you really gotta start projecting and figuring out who you like and who you think is maybe underutilized and things like that, or guys who have upside. Like Campbell and Makuba are the first example to me. I had Campbell on my list. Ed had Makuba. Ed went with, well, Makuba's going to play early in the season, and he's probably right. I'm like, I don't give a shit. If Campbell's out there by week 8, who cares?
Right.
He's a better player. So I don't know. I'm not worried about the first 6 games of somebody's career. similar to Cooper last year. It's like, who cares? It's about a longer term, but yeah, I mean, I had him right 24, 25. So, and I think at this stage, Kelly's, it's hard to say because one, like I said, one was the 18th pick in the draft. But I'm one of those people that believe if Kaylee Ringo went back to college, he would have been a first round pick. He was so young. He's the youngest player in the NFL when he's drafted.
Yeah, and he was very good in the SEC.
This is his third year in the pros, and he's still younger than Quinyon Mitchell. That's how young he is. So I think there's tremendous upside with Kaylee Ringo. And the thing is, now you can go back. You can go back to Eli Ricks' senior season, also at Alabama. And you can go back to the pre-draft, the goopy mock drafts before the college season started, because people do those all year round. And there are a bunch of them that had Eli Ricks as a first-round pick. A bunch of them. But he didn't play that well, and he was expected to be a big star at Alabama, and he ended up going undrafted. And he's still around. He's still got an opportunity. So I'm not saying things could have went wrong if Kaylee Ringo, but here's the difference. Eli, which I bring up all the time, ran a 4.6. Keely's 6'2", 205, running a sub 4.4. Trust me, he would have been a first-round pick.
Yeah, right.
So he's got tremendous upside, but you're what do you want? Do you want the upside or do you want the veteran steadiness? Then I would say if you want the steadiness, I'd say, well, then play Adoree. But if you want the upside, I'd say play Kaylee. And that's what the Eagles are obviously shooting for.
Yeah, but that's a tough thing. I mean, if that upside's not going to be realized until 2026 and you're trying to win a Super Bowl in 2025, I mean,
well,
could that be
here's the thing. If you really believe in the player, it's time to, excuse my French, but shit or get off the pot with Kaylee Ringo.
No, you're right. I agree. It's year 3. I mean, it's year 3 for the player.
So, I mean, you got it. And Jim Schwartz always called him startup cost. Got to get him. You got to start sometime. And even if he struggles a little bit early in the season and he's playing his best football late, great. It's what you want. But you got to get him over at some point. So if you believe in the kid.
Yeah, and that point's now, right? I mean, you're not going to do it another year.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
It's time to poop or get off the pot.
I like that analogy you used there, Johnny Mac. All right, so Kaylee Ringo comes in at 21. All right, and that's going to do it for the 3 names that we have so far. You probably have, 20 coming out today and 19 or just 20?
No, that was the one that came out today.
21 was Ringo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dotson came out yesterday.
And
I had forgotten Ed did Adoree on Sunday night, so that's my fault.
All right, so there we are, everybody. There's the top 25 so far. Johnny Mac and Ed Kratz doing that over on Sports Illustrated. We're following it along here on Birds 365. Those are your first 6 names because the first 25 had 2 names, but overall pretty good. I think we're in the bottom part where it's harder to get players than it is at the top. But overall, solid list so far. Johnny Mac, that's the top 25. We'll take a commercial break. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning on Birds 365. Any super chats, by the way, today in hour number 2, we will take on the show. So we appreciate all of your guys' support of the show as well. Let's get to our commercial break now. When we come back, I want to talk a little Antoine Powell Ryland. And then in hour number 2, I got some A.J. Brown talk. Let's have some A.J. Brown discussion. So we'll do all that coming up next here on Birds 365. We'll be right back.